it's just a neighborhood near a public park. The great thing is there's quite a mix demographically. So there are young families, there are isolated singles, there are some homeless, but we have a lot of just mix of society around us. And so the opportunity is there for people from all different walks of life to come. The community is very supportive of what we're doing.
Dinner churches are starting all over North America. The Dinner Church podcast is creating a space for conversation with dinner church pastors and leaders who are a part of what God is doing through Dinner Church today. I'm JD. I became a dinner church pastor 2 years ago, and I'm retracing my steps and having conversations I wish I could have had when I was starting out. Join us, lean in, learn more about what it means to launch and lead Dinner Church. When I was starting out as a dinner church pastor, I was desperate to find stories of how dinner churches were actually happening, and in as many different contexts as I could find. That's a little bit of just how my brain works, but I was anxious to hear how people in real spaces, in real contexts, were doing dinner church. And I absolutely love the conversation that you're about to hear with myself and Megan Monterrosa from the Grove Church. And she has launched 2 dinner churches now out of a large church out on the West Coast. And she has so much rich things to share with us about what it's actually like to launch a dinner church, how she has uniquely brought in their vision and approach, and what dinner church is like in a suburban context. So this conversation is rich, a lot of great tidbits, practical things, as well as some very meaningful, rich theology behind why we do what we do. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Megan. All right, Megan, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm great, JD. I'm happy to be here. How are you?
I'm good. Why don't you start by just telling us where you're at? Where are we having this conversation from? Tell us a little bit about your context geographically, but then your role in church life. Give us the synopsis of Megan Monterrosa.
All right. So I work on staff at the Grove Church, which is in Marysville, Washington. It's kind of a large church. We have a lot of cool stuff going on. And so we're about an hour north of Seattle. And on staff there, I have a couple of roles. So I'm our lead pastor's executive assistant. And then I also, of course, lead our dinner church, which we call the neighborhood. And we meet in a public space about a half mile from this building. So we really love what God is doing in both contexts. So I'm excited to share about that.
Well, we're excited to hear more about not only your journey towards dinner church, but what you got going on right now.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about that. Let's get into it. Where did you first hear about dinner church? How did that come into your imagination? And walk us through that a little bit, how you responded to that.
Yeah. So in May of 2021, we had like an all staff vision planning meeting, and they had asked us to bring ideas to the table, things that we think we might want to do for future ministry endeavors. And so I had said, hey, could we do community dinners? I'm a huge foodie. And so I wanted to do something with food. I just didn't even know what. But another pastor on staff, actually in that same meeting, he said, what if we do dinner church? And that was the first time I ever heard. And it stopped me in my tracks. And I said, what is that? What is that? And so
what did you think it was when you heard it first?
Okay,
I'm curious.
When I first heard it, before I saw anything, when I first heard it, I imagined the community dinner setting, which is very much what it is. But I had no idea how church would work in that setting. I just thought, okay, well, what is dinner? What is dinner church? What is even the term? At first, you're like, I don't know what, is it church? Is it dinner?
Yes.
And so I was like, gosh, what is that? So, yeah.
Good. So that sparked your curiosity. And then I've learned enough from the little interactions I've had with you that you go all in with stuff. And I'm sure you learned a ton. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
Oh my goodness,
of what happened next.
Completely true. So so what happened was, excitingly, we contacted Verlin, right? Verlin Fosner, because my lead pastor knows him, and he said, you go right to Verlin and find out about this. So that's what we did. So we attended one of his day-long encounter seminars, which is like it's called Encounter. It's a virtual thing. Really great though. It's full of really rich teaching. So that's a good place to start if you want to learn more. And we did that, and that was exciting because we started to really imagine what God might be able to do through this. And that's how we got started. So I'll tell you though, when I first learned all of that, it was a lot to take in. And I thought, okay, what is this? Is this just a dinner? Is this a feed? Right? It is not a feed, and it not at all. But I didn't know, like, okay, well, I love food, but what does that have to do with really the gospel, right? And the thing is that I think our preconceived notions about meals and feeding the community can come into play. We don't even know they're there, but the things that we assume that we think we know is going to happen. But the point is that when I entered into this journey, I had the privilege of also doing the Dinner Church School of Leadership at the same time we were launching. And so I did that, which is a 9-month program. It is fantastic. And the whole thing started to change me from what I was doing with the launching, because we launched in October of 2021. So we launched while I was doing this school, but God started to change me. He started to transform me into, my heart just started to break for the lost in ways it never had before. That, I got out of this building and walked down the street to where people live a completely different life that I had no idea that they were even there. Like, I had never taken the time to do that. I started to think about incarnational living. I started to think about the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. I mean, that's what he would do. He would move into that apartment complex. He would be there, that type of thing. And it started to permeate, all of my thinking about church and being missional, and while still working on staff here. And so that's crazy, because then you're starting to live in two worlds in a sense, because your thinking is really changing. And the format is so different, and the ecclesiology is so different. But what God is doing is he's transforming you, as the leader. And then you start to lead people into it. And then they start to catch that, and you start to learn how to teach them that. And that the whole thing is really incredible. So it has been a very personally transforming journey. It still is. In addition to the amazing things that God is doing at the neighborhood. So,
well, that you're highlighting one of the things that is coming out in these conversations I'm having with thought leaders and dinner church pastors is there is a dual track. There is a transformational track of the leaders of dinner church to change their own hearts, habits, and postures towards the world around them and towards Jesus in some sense. And just a different way of viewing leadership in this different sort of space. So if we were to double click on that a little bit, what do you think were the challenges that Jesus brought to you personally in that? Or what were the things that were the invitations that Jesus brought to you in that kind of change season that you're talking about?
That's a really beautiful question, because it's so important in what God's doing in our hearts and transforming us first, right, as we go out. Yeah. And so for me, I think the invitation is to be in the city and in the community, in the context that we serve, outside of these walls, as wonderful as these walls are. But getting into people's lives, right, and their stories as much as we possibly can is a big change, and it's a big shift in the way that we approach everything we do, from planning and resources to our focus, the way we train our volunteers, the things we talk about, what qualifies as a win, that kind of thing. But seriously, the posture does change, because we are thinking deeply about what it means to be a Christ follower in every sense of the word, the way he would spend his time, the way he would choose to do things, the things he would say, the places he would go, during the day. Or I can't sit in my office, my cozy office all day. I'm happy here in church land, but guess what? The gospel and Jesus in me is not content at all to sit in here, and I need to get out there. I need to get out there and be amongst the people that need Jesus. So,
I remember this moment. Part of our story, Christian and my wife and I, who co-launched North City together, we started off in kind of traditional church sermons, worship in a community space. And our mission was to love our neighbors in the way of Jesus. And it still is, but there was a slow developing cognitive dissonance the more that we kind of had what I would call like a stage centric expression of that, where we're like, Jesus is like proclaimed a little bit from stages, but he did a whole lot of eating with people, a lot of healing, a lot of spending time with people. And I realize now at the early stages of my journey, that cognitive dissonance or that holy discontent that kind of like saw a difference between our mission statement and how we were actually acting that out is kind of the fuel, the healthy conflict that can birth vision and direction towards Dinner Church. And it sounds like that's similar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I love what you're saying, because it's not that our traditional church models aren't good. Like, I still love them, but for in our communities and the demographics and the people that we're trying to reach, it can be a completely different conversation, right? When you really get in there, like you're saying. And the dinner table, I really see it as something designed by God, in the sense of like, we're not just eating. There's a lot of spiritual things happening there that God is doing as we're around the table with people, that is so special and intentional. God himself met with people all through Scripture. Jesus did it all the time, like you said. And I can imagine him eating and conversing with people a lot more often than, and he taught too, but, a lot more than we remember sometimes,
Yeah. So what did this actually look like when you started to try it? When you're like, all right, here we go. We're doing this. Describe to us what community, you're kind of using community dinner and dinner church synonymously. Yeah. I've heard that a lot of people, and this is sort of from the work of Berlin, like suggesting using community dinner for external communication with the neighborhood, and talking about dinner church for internal communication with your people, so they understand the spiritually rich elements of dinner church. So once you launched community dinner, what did that look like? How did you do it the same as what you had read in some of the resources, or did you tweak it a little bit, and how have you tweaked it along the way?
Yeah, so we did tweak it because just out of necessity. So when we started, we got our good community space, which we love that space. But for us, we didn't have the worship leaders, to do it right away. And so right now we sometimes have live worship and sometimes we just use a playlist, and that's okay. Simple is okay. So that's one thing. We don't have the live artists, simply because we just don't know of anyone who can do that for us. But I would love to have that in the future. So we don't have them. But otherwise, we did stick to kind of what we were taught, like the format of coming in and we eat dinner for about 20 minutes, and then we share the Christ story for 7 to 10 minutes. And then, we keep eating at tables. We're discussing. It's very relational. And we're building those relationships over time. And that's what we do. So,
when you share the Christ story, or it's been referred to as the Jesus story in other people's contexts as well. Yeah. Are you simply just sharing the story, or are you, what does that sound like or feel like in the space? Are you adding a little bit of your own story in it, or you're like, hey, Jesus did this thing once, and then you leave it at that? What is that like for you guys?
No, we for sure intentionally use our own stories every time. So the way that we do it is we're sharing about, a story that either Jesus told, or the early church, or it's a story about him from Scripture. So it's always about Jesus himself, because that is how people are going to encounter him, is by hearing about him. And he's made so accessible with something that's really simple. But we always incorporate a story from our own lives in that, because part of the power of that is people are able to resonate. They're able to identify with what you're saying, and that you're not up there talking at them. It's like, this is a conversation about Jesus that we're having. You know what? This is what I've learned here. Or I also love to ask questions. Sometimes I will ask thought-provoking questions. I've learned that a lot from J.R. Briggs in a masterclass of Fresh Expressions. It was awesome about questions, but that can be really great in that space, and let people respond if you so dare. But I do that sometimes, or we are just sharing. We always pray a prayer of healing over the group when we are done. And that is always really powerful. That's something we've learned from Berlin, but it's really, really special when that happens. Sometimes that's the most powerful moment of the evening, and where we feel the Holy Spirit moving is when we're praying that prayer of healing over the group at the end of the talk. So,
wow, that's awesome. And something you've noted already that's unique about your situation is you do these community dinners in a suburban context.
Yes.
And people come to the idea of dinner church from a lot of different contexts, from rural, urban, and suburban. But that's something that's unique to you guys. So what is it about, what's unique about dinner church in the suburban context? What are some of the opportunities and what are some of the challenges that you've noticed starting dinner churches in the suburban context?
Yeah. And that's a great question because we wonder, how is it going to work? Because I knew that Berlin's was really urban, right? And I didn't know, like, how is that going to work? Because what you have in the suburban context, like our dinner church space is right in the middle of, a neighborhood. There's homes around. There are some apartments. It's just a neighborhood near a public park. And so what you have, though, is there are the great thing is there's quite a mix demographically. So there are young families, there are isolated singles, there are some homeless, but we have a lot of just mix of society around us. And so the opportunity is there for people from all different walks of life to come. But the challenge is, of course, it's not just a walking village. So you do have to drive. Most people have to drive to get there. And so, some people, if they could walk, they could probably come, but some people can't walk to it because, it's in a space around homes and stuff. But the other great thing is that, families do come. We have people from all ages and different stages of life that come. And so we get a really good blend because of that. And we have found that when we let the community know, we're pretty good at letting the community know on Facebook in different ways, getting the word out just so people know we're there. And then they really spread the word because it is in that community. Like people know each other. We have a big city, but there's a lot of those groups. And so people will tell each other. And now we have we have a regular nucleus of people that's coming and considers us their church. And then we have a lot of new people. But it does work really well because now that people know we're there, it's not a problem and they come to it and it's really great. Plus, when you have the park nearby, we can go invite people. I do it all the time. Just right from the park, like come in and have dinner with us. And that's really great too. So there's a lot of opportunity there too. Like the community is very supportive of what we're doing.
Yeah. Our church meets in a public park too. We've just moved outside here for the summer in Minnesota. You got to take advantage of it. And so I think that people listening to this podcast, thinking through location, I hope that you're hearing Megan say location. That's a part of the discernment process, and proximity to and visibility to the isolated is important, which might be a little bit simpler in some sense in an urban setting where those are more defined. What I hear you saying is that not only by choosing that community space are you visible from like walk by sort of thing, but you guys have somehow, whether it's the direction of the Holy Spirit or your own just kind of natural word of mouth, people have learned about you and your community and told others about it. Is there any intentionality that you guys have put in that sort of inviting or so there's people walk by the sign and see it, but people have heard about it. You mentioned Facebook, a couple other things. What have you done to help people find you?
Yeah, which, you know what? This is a good point, is that our venue is actually off the road a little bit. So we were concerned about that because we're like, okay, it's not actually visible from the street, the actual building. You have to know that's there. Now we do have signs. Okay. So we have A-frame signs. We have really cool graphics that are sort of eye-catching. So we have those out. But yes, we're very intentional about getting the word out because we knew we had to, right? For people to be able to find us. And it's not like, oh, what's that building? So, but here's what works is that the Facebook community groups are, okay, so we have our own Facebook page. You can find it at NH Dinners. If you look up NH Dinners on Facebook, it's there. But we post in 7 different community groups every week. And I do it the morning of dinner church, and people know to look for it now. But now what's cool is people see it there. It gets a lot of traffic. The posts always do well. Sometimes I'll boost them if it's a really special event that we're doing and I just really want to boost it, then I will. And that is very effective. But also on Facebook, people share it with their groups. So like people will go share it in moms groups because they know they love what we're doing and that even spreads farther.
Yeah.
And once in a while I've done an Instagram post, but then also we are in public entities. So we're on like the library calendar of, meal resources. We are the public entities that know we're here are trying to help us get the word out. We have touch cards and sometimes I've gone door to door And so I don't knock on doors or anything like that, but I will put little invitations. I've actually made invitations before, just designed them in Canva, and gone through all the, on prayer walks and just put these on doors, and people have come because of that, because they felt invited. So we've done that as well. Prayer walking is, by the way, very important. So yeah, all those things.
Just want to back up and offer a few vocabulary pieces for those who are tracking with Megan there. She said, boost one of her posts, which is something is like a paid boost that you can do to an event that you have on Facebook. And we've done that in our church before, and it's been pretty effective. Yeah. The other thing you mentioned is Canva. And if you don't know about Canva yet, and you're a nonprofit, this is a free commercial that maybe they'll edit out later. But Canva is one of the most powerful, simple to use design tools that I think has been very effective for us as a church to communicate our story through. So that's fantastic. And can you say a little bit more about what these groups are that you and your others are posting on in Facebook, if someone was curious about that?
Yeah. So a few of them are crime and community groups. So don't be put off if it says crime, because those are where people are looking for community news. And so there's a number of those. There's like probably 3 or 4 that are those. And then there's also one that it's called like angel gifting or something, but this is about like people giving stuff away in the community. We post in the everything free pages. So everything free in Marysville, just so people know that because it is free. So we're there, but it's also just a community space. Then I am not a mom, but my mom friends will go and post in the moms groups. And that's really great, because moms with their families who are busy, they're like, oh my goodness, this is available. So those are the types of groups that we post in. Yeah.
That's awesome. So many good practical nuggets in there, y'all. So I hope you were listening.
Yeah.
Okay. So you get this off the ground, the word gets out. You're running this community dinner. And I want to go back to something you said earlier, that you're a foodie. And I know that you've written some stuff for Fresh Expressions about that. Tell us how. One of the primary questions people come to Dinner Church with is like, how do we do the food? And everybody has a different answer to that. But what was your answer? Given your story as someone who's a foodie, what does this look like for you?
So, yes, I love food. I love cooking. Okay. So we cook the food ourselves. But also that we do it that way because it's also more affordable for us. So it would cost us a lot more if we got food from restaurants, with the number that we have to make food for. And so what we do is we buy all the food and cook most of it from scratch here at the church. We have a really good kitchen that works for that. And so that's a blessing. And so we have just an army of volunteers who comes and cooks. And then we have a lady who bakes for us, and she bakes it all from scratch. It's pretty incredible. Our volunteers are outstanding people. And actually we have one kid who is actually on the Food Network. He will be this summer. And he's one of our chefs now. He's 17 years old. This kid is incredible. And he loves sharing the gospel through food. He does it all the time on his own. And now he's doing it with the neighborhood. So God is just doing a lot of cool stuff. So we cook the food ourselves and we hotbox it over to the venue. And so you just get like the catering supplies, and we just take it over when it's ready, or we use things that we plug in to keep it warm. That's what we do.
Are the people who are helping you at the community dinner, like your team, some of the same people who cook, or do you have different teams cook and are like a host team? How does that look?
Yeah. So we have always given people the opportunity to serve where they're comfortable at first, but we also say, hey, everyone's an evangelist, right, with what we're doing. But people have the choice. So some people, they do want to cook, and then they want to come over and be with us for dinner. Some people really want to help, in this endeavor, but they only have time during the day. Or maybe they're retired, or maybe, that's their thing. So some people just cook. And then some people come after work and come help out with Dinner Church in the evenings. And as far as the roles, we have a number of different things that people do. So some people, they host all the time. They greet at the door, and they're amazing at that. And that's what they love to do. Some people are table friends. So, sitting at tables, we always have somebody from our team at every table, building friendships, and that relational evangelism, very important. And then we have people who serve food. So we do not do buffet style. We take you a plate. We bring that over to you because we Yeah, our volunteers insist on that. We've never changed it because they insist on that the personal
Wow.
touch. And so it's kind of like a restaurant where the whole room is seated at one time and everybody needs food. But we make it work. And
Wow.
what this does though is there is now a position for food servers, right, and food platers because we serve quite a few. So we've got a back room, like a catering kitchen at the venue, where we've got like 7 people like dishing up the plates and making sure everything is how we want, And then we have the team that actually brings the food out. And then we have people who are kind of floating and making sure everything is refilled. And because we have 2 dinners every Tuesday night, we have to clean in between the dinners and then do it again. But it's really a lot of fun and it works. It works great, actually. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I love hearing about this. There is like such an array. If you're listening to this and this is the first dinner church story that you've heard, please note there is so much diversity in how people do food.
Yeah.
And what you just described is so beautiful. And I love how, there's dinner church stories of people throwing together a potluck every week, and it's just a mystery box every week, and it works, and it's great, and it's affordable. Yeah, folks like us who do like what I call like Costco catering, where you get kind of the main catering, and you have a key person and a couple volunteers that assemble and serve there, and then you've got the Food Network, up and coming geniuses. No, that's a beautiful thing. And I love how I hear you bringing, this is true of all of the food expressions that I've heard of. People bring the concept of agape love and feast through their contextualized way of doing food. And I hear that in like, no, we don't want a buffet. We want to serve these people. We want to come alongside them and help them feel the love of Jesus that way.
Exactly.
Beautiful.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, you have also mentioned that you are on staff with this larger church in the area. You have a relationship. You do this in concert with or out of the, I don't know how you guys define your relationship, but I gotta imagine there's some healthy tension there, or some like learning from each other and some curiosity between each other. Definitely. And so talk a little bit about how that dynamic has been. And I'm sure it's a developing thing as you're, what were you like 3 years into this now?
No, we're just a year and a half in.
A year and a half in. So you're in the thick of this.
We are.
Can you, as much as you're willing to share, what has that dynamic been like for someone maybe listening who's contemplating the same sort of relationship?
Yes. And that is a great question. It's something I have learned so much about over the past year and a half. So I will say that our church has done this from the get-go out of a desire to reach people because our church wants to be missional. And so, it is a beautiful thing because our leadership at the Grove has always supported our endeavors. They're proud of us. They're like, go, go, go. They even told us, hey, if you fail at this, it's fine. We got you. So that support is incredible. They also have let us run with it as far as like, this is our vision. This is what we're doing. They put a lot of trust in us. Also, we're funded by the big church, right? So the funding we don't have to worry about that because it's covered. There's a budget, of course, that we follow, but we are grateful to our pastors and our board for believing in us with that. And we've got volunteers who are super healthy, believers and that love Jesus that come out of our big church that come and help us, because we have a great volunteer base. But the other side of that is that the ecclesiology of dinner church is so different. It just functions differently. It really is nothing like, the inherited church model. And so at first, your head's going to explode a little bit and you just have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with, and this is the exciting thing though, because what's happening is you're stretching and I'm becoming super flexible, right, in the kingdom because I have to, because I live in both worlds every day. So, and I see the wonderful, beautiful things that God is doing at the Grove. Our church is healthy and alive and strong, but so is the neighborhood. And so then I go and lead the neighborhood and we've got a whole different way of thinking about the way the church works. And both are beautiful. And it's amazing though, because you're like, this is really weird because at first I'm going to learning all this stuff and I'm like, okay, but doesn't that mean that what we're doing at the inherited church is wrong? That's not true at all. It's not true at all, because God is working in all of these contexts where we are doing church. But what we're excited about is the differences, because so in me has grown this dexterity, right? And this ability to do all of those things and see God working and be open to what God is doing in each space. So there is tension, though. There is tension when, questions are like, well, we don't, well, hey, what's the fruit of dinner church lately? Or, you have to keep telling those stories and sometimes clearing up congregational misconceptions about what it is that you do, because people may not understand, and that's not their fault. But we bring them along and talk about the great things that God is doing, and just patience with that. Oh, actually, we're not, just sometimes correcting mindsets, and that's okay. That's going to happen over time. It just helps everyone think more missionally too. So, yeah.
That's really good. And how have you, so there's one level to help your partner church understand what you're doing.
Yes.
But how have you helped? Because I'm inferring that there's kind of an integrated relationship with the volunteers who help make dinner church happen, have a relationship or maybe participate regularly at the big church. So how have you seen them transform in the midst of that tension that you're talking about? Like you're saying, it's good. What's the good transformation that comes from them kind of walking through the door of a community dinner and being like, oh, this, and sitting around tables and engaging in relationship? What have you seen happen?
It is absolutely beautiful to watch what happens with our volunteers. And I love it. I love it every day, because that God has placed incredible gifts in every person in your church. And at dinner church, I have seen people grow into the gifts of God in them some that did not know they had gifts like that. I know we have we have a lot of stories like this, but we have a man who kind of was intimidated about talking to people, but we asked him if he would be a table friend. And his wife was sharing with me how much this has transformed him, because now he's more of a relational evangelist than he ever thought he could be. And so that happens all the time with our volunteers. They find so much purpose, and they're full of joy when they come into dinner church, because they know that what they're doing is tangibly reaching people, meeting needs. And as they're sharing their stories, you see their gifts come out in different ways. And they have so much opportunity to do that in so many different ways. And so because we're in the community and we're reaching different people who aren't really part of our other church. And so they feel really effective. They know they are. And we kind of function as a little family too, and we have our own conversations and our own trainings, talking about that missional mindset and all those different things that we experience in dinner church.
That's awesome. I debated whether or not I wanted to do this on the podcast with you, but in a previous conversation this last year we were having about dinner church, I asked you, can you tell a funny moment from dinner church? And you told the story of this gal who came to dinner church, who had a different way of interacting with sermons, who found herself also coming to Grove, and then assuming that you interact the same way with sermons as you do Jesus stories. Can you tell that story? I had so much joy hearing that. And I think it's a great example that accentuates some of the tension that maybe people feel, a good tension about how our neighbors experience dinner church, and then how they experience the inherited church, and how the tension and the awkwardness that creates actually should teach us something. So please tell the story.
Yes. This is a wonderful story. It's one of our favorite stories from dinner church that we've ever had. So this lady started coming to dinner church every week, and she was always really engaged. But we learned she is not a believer, right? She was not a believer at all, and no context for church, like didn't grow up in church. I think she had never heard the gospel before she came to dinner church. But she was really interested in having discussions, right? Which you can. Dinner church is like this big family gathering, it's like a big family gathering. It's not really as much of a controlled environment. I mean, we're super organized, but it's like, hey, let's talk and everything. And so eventually though, she did want to come to the Grove, on a Sunday morning. And so she came, and and what she does is during the sermon, which everyone's pretty quiet during the sermon, right?
Right.
She starts interrupting our pastor, just interrupting with a question and raising her hand like, oh, but what about this? And it's the funniest thing because she doesn't know. She just doesn't know better. And it's a beautiful moment though. It actually happened several times to the point where I had to sit with her because and she didn't understand why. We had this conversation. I had coffee with her and I said, it's really all I can think. I thought, it's really just that we're just letting everyone hear everything that, so that everybody can hear the points of what's being said. But honestly, she was so raw and so just innocent, had no idea that's, and it is a good lesson because wow, she's so out of place, but she is where she needs to be. Right. And it was amazing because she kept trying to interrupt and she did it a few times. So we love that though, because it was great.
So good.
Yeah. So.
I love that. And stories that I've heard similar to that from different dinner churches, because it's like this, prophetic humor, this prophetic reality that kind of accentuates a blind spot we may have having listened to many, many sermons in our lives, that maybe our neighbors aren't going to interact with Jesus stories in the same way. And maybe they're going to want to ask questions, and maybe they're going to want to talk about it, and maybe they're going to want to share their opinion about it. And I think I've noticed that in our journey too. It's a beautiful sort of nudge from the Holy Spirit to say, see, this is where I want to be. This is, and as you said earlier, sermons still have the power of God working through them, but there's also ways that we need to have. I loved your idea of dexterity and flexibility to engage in both ways. Yeah. Well, Megan, thank you for this. Let's conclude with our rapid fire round. So I love to do this. I'm going to ask you some questions and just give me 1 sentence responses, because we'd love to hear this from all of our guests. So, what's the best part of dinner church for you lately?
Definitely the people. So this kaleidoscope of people that God brings in that is beautiful and colorful and alive with so much life and different parts of life that I just cannot get over how much I love all the different people. And that includes our volunteers as well that God is putting together every week. So,
all right. Yeah. The next one is a high stakes question for a foodie. Are you ready?
Yes.
What's your favorite meal at dinner church?
Okay. Hands down, Thanksgiving dinner.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Every year. Yep.
So good. If you could recommend one book, article, or resource to someone interested in dinner church, I'm going to put a caveat in. We've already gotten the welcome to dinner church stuff. You can say that too, but outside of that, what would it be? Book, article, or resource that you would recommend to someone interested in dinner church?
So the Dinner Church Collective website is wonderful because it is comprehensive. It'll show you everything that you need. So dinnerchurch.com. But my favorite book on dinner church is Rowan Fosner's, the one that is called Building Bridges by Breaking Bread, because that book is more detailed and it is really, really powerful and inspirational for a lot of different reasons. But I would recommend that book as my favorite one. So yeah.
Wonderful. One sentence piece of advice you'd give to a dinner church leader or pastor starting out.
Okay. So set the table, allow the love of Jesus to be evident in everything that you're doing, and let the Savior be good at his job.
So good. Megan, thank you so much for giving us a slice of your time and sharing your story. This whole podcast is about recording conversations I wish I could have had when I was getting started. And I hope that if you're listening to this, you found some value. If you're just getting started, or maybe you've been rocking it a lot longer than both Megan and I, and this is just encouraging to you. So Megan, thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, JD. This has been great.
Thanks for listening today. We'd love to connect with you and hear more about your dinner church story. You can connect with us over at dinnerchurch.com. It's also where you can find a lot of great resources about how to start or sustain your dinner church journey.
Dinner Church Podcast is brought to you by the Dinner Church Collective and Fresh Expressions. The Dinner Church Collective is a nationwide community of everyday missionaries spreading the word about this simple, effective, and historical approach to starting new churches. We sure hope you'll join us for the Dinner Church Summit November 9th through the 11th, 2023 in Orlando, Florida. This will be the inaugural gathering of the Dinner Church Collective, and it's your opportunity to be a part of developing a family of pioneers who are passionate about recapturing this powerful expression of God's kingdom. You will meet new colleagues who become friends, all while eating well, worshiping heartily, and learning tangible practices for building a dinner church movement. Learn more at dinnerchurch.com/summit. This season of the Dinner Church podcast is hosted by Heather Evans and J.D. Larson. It's edited by Joel Limbowen and produced by Kathleen Blackie and Chris Morton. Dr. Verlin Fosner is the director of Dinner Church Collective, and Dr. Chris Backert is the North American director of Fresh Expressions. If you have learned something or been encouraged by this podcast, please help us spread the word. You can give us a review on Apple Music or Spotify and even share this episode on social media. May God bless you as you serve Jesus' kingdom.